The Shepnaz Podcast begins now.
Welcome to the Shepnaz Podcast. I'm Joe, and I'm your host today. And today we have a treat of being able to speak to some people from across the ocean. Actually, they may be closer to from around here, but currently they are across the ocean. And as you know, on Sunday mornings, we do a segment called Because You Gave. And during that time, we like to highlight some of the ministries that are going on around the world as part of the Nazarene Church and ministries that we support as a church. And today we have with us a couple guests that are missionaries in Okinawa, Japan. And as it might be early morning for us here in the Central Ohio area, it is much later for them in Japan. And we want to welcome in Brian and Julie Woolery. And we focused on them just a few weeks ago, and they were gracious enough to come on the podcast with us today. So welcome in, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
We're happy to be here.
Well, we are happy to have you. And we had a little discussion right before we started recording that it's always a possibility that there could be some sort of typhoon that's occurring while we're recording right now.
Yeah, we've had some very rainy and windy days, but it's our typhoon season right now, so it's normal.
So I think according to the weather forecast, in the next 20 minutes, this hurricane, it's a small one, will go past our island in the ocean, but that's kind of normal here, so hopefully our internet will be good.
Yeah, I think anytime you can just refer to a hurricane as, it's just going to be a small one, then it actually is probably part of your regular day then.
Yes.
All right, well, we want to dive right in, and we want to get to know you a little bit. So, ladies first, we'll talk. Julie, tell us a little bit about how kind of your background and your walk of faith, how you came to Christ, and a little bit about just getting to know you, kind of where you're from and everything.
Sure. So I grew up in South Texas, kind of in the San Antonio area. And I grew up in a Nazarene church, actually in a little town right north of San Antonio, that my grandparents helped start. They had been part of San Antonio First Church for a long time and then had moved to this other town, and there was not a Nazarene church there. So my grandparents helped start that. And then my parents later moved back to that town. And then when I was born, that was the church I grew up in. So I grew up in a really wonderful Christian family. And I remember coming to faith as a young child, just talking with my mom about the things I had been learning at home and at church. So following Jesus was a very normal part of life for me. My parents are not pastors, but they're kind of they are the people you want in your church. They are the people that do everything else. And so church was really important for me growing up. It was a small church, but I remember telling my friends that my church was like my family, that everyone there were like my aunts and uncles. And so church involvement was really, really important for me as a kid and growing up, and definitely very formational because it was a small church and opportunities that I was given for leadership. I look back and think, how did they entrust me with things when I was so young? But it was an amazing community. And my parents are actually still part of that church. And so some of those people that were my Sunday school teachers and, youth leaders and children's church teachers are still there and have been involved in my life, my whole life. So that was really special. When I was a kid, one thing I love about the Nazarene Church is our focus on missions and mission education and awareness. And so there is a story that when I was young, I was reading one of the children's missionary books, and I went in to my dad and said, I think God is calling me to be a missionary. And he said, that's great, Julie. And then that was kind of it. It was never like a specific thing. I think for me, it was just more this sense of following God wherever he leads, whatever that meant in my life. And so as I grew up and was in high school and looking at college, I never had anything specific, even that I really wanted to study. I was interested in different things, but again, it was just kind of always like, I know God is going to lead me. I'm going to go where God leads, and whatever that looks like. So I ended up going to SNU, to Southern Nazarene University. Both my parents had gone there, and I was a sociology major. So I was looking at becoming a social worker. And when I was in college, there were a lot of opportunities for short-term mission trips that I hadn't had before. And so because I had been in such a small church, I hadn't had those opportunities growing up. So once I started doing some short-term mission trips in college, it was kind of like God reminded me, hey, remember how you were always interested in those missionary stories growing up? Like, this is still something that I might have for you. But again, it was not specific. I had no idea what that meant. I will say, my freshman year of college, I went on a week-long, what we used to call work and witness trip to Sicily. And I love coffee. And of course, coffee in Sicily is amazing. And so I was very convinced that after I graduated from college, I was going to go volunteer with Nazarene missions in Europe. But it was basically because I loved the coffee so much. So it was never anything specific, but there was definitely a sense of calling and just following where God was leading. And then in college, that ended up involving Brian also. So I guess that means your turn.
All right. Well, I share the love of coffee. We'll have to exchange stories at some point about that. But Brian, kind of bring us to where she ended up in college. Somehow you got there too. So start at the beginning for you.
Yeah, so I grew up in just outside Nashville, Tennessee, in a town called Hendersonville. And my dad was a pastor of a Nazarene church there. And so it was just like all I knew growing up. But, just because you grow up in the church doesn't mean that you're choosing to follow Jesus. And I remember as a young kid in service, Jesus became very real to me, and I knew I needed him. I needed his love and forgiveness. And so that began a journey that, really began to blossom into what does it look to follow him? And I remember when I was in probably a young teen, as a part of some of the activities our youth group was doing, it was the end of my children's ministry, actually. I began hearing about what we talk about, sanctification and being like completely surrendered. And it was wonderful because like at that time, God was like, do you want to follow me deeper? And I was like, I didn't know there was deeper. And so that began. And right around that time, I remember my family was on vacation in East Tennessee, and it was a place that we had not anticipated to go, but it was a Christian-run kind of chalet in the mountains because our camping trip got rained out, completely rained out. And I sat down and they had a movie room, and I put this little VCR video in, and there was a video of an airplane, and I just slowly sat down because I had become enthralled with airplanes late in my childhood. I just thought they were the greatest thing. And it was talking about mission aviation. And at that time in my little head, it was like God said, hey, you want to do something like that? And I thought, I love Jesus and I love airplanes, and you can do both together.
Right.
And so for me, it's unique, but that became like, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to give myself to. And so as I went on through high school, God continued to help me kind of walk through friendships and relationships. What does it look like? I went to public schools of being a believer and loving and being a witness to others, but also continuing to foster this dream, this impossible dream. I'd like to be a pilot. So for me, when I was in high school, God miraculously provided opportunities and resources and funding from a lot of different places we didn't expect. And so when I was 16 years old, I soloed a small aircraft for the first time. When I was 17, I got my pilot's license. And when I was 18, I got my instrument rating. And by this time, I'm all in. It's like, this is me. This is what I'm going to do. And so I found out at the time the Nazarene Church had 3 aircraft strategically placed in the 3 points in the African continent. And they helped take missionaries into very remote areas that it would take a long time and a lot of effort and expense to get there by car or by boat. But if you can get in on a dirt runway or an improvised runway. So I thought that would be amazing. And I actually got to go, and I lived in Swaziland, which is now Iswat. I don't know.
We're Asia Pacific.
Yeah, we're living now in Asia. It's Swatili. Anyway, but I got to fly with them there, and it was just like I'm living the dream. I mean, this is the most amazing thing in the world. And so my family, when I was in high school, we moved. My dad was a pastor, and then he got another ministry assignment in Indiana, and all of this was coming together for me, and I decided to go to Southern Nazarene University because they offered credit for aviation. And so we get to Southern Nazarene University, and it's the second week of school. I just come back from flying airplanes in Africa as a 19-year-old. And
you've got a little bit of swagger as you're coming to college, right?
I really liked my life. And then God says, okay, Brian, I want you to walk away from it all.
Yeah.
And that was probably one of those deeply shaping moments in life. And so maybe we can end it there.
Let's keep going.
So for everyone listening, looking for encouragement, sometimes you just get disappointed. Well, I mean, there's some truth there. God allowed you to have that moment. It allowed you to have that time. It didn't mean that was going to be for forever, right? So as this, you landed at, metaphorically and perhaps literally, at Southern. And how was it then that you guys came together?
Yeah. So what ended up happening our freshman year, Julie and I met in the same group of friends, and we hung out together. And for me, I had let the gift and the calling of God really become an idol in my life. It was the thing that really identified myself with. I gave myself my heart to flying. Mm-hmm. And it was a great act of kindness and love that God had to say, listen, you've got to follow me, or you've got to fly. And you've put yourself in the position of this. When I walked away from that, it opened me up to, I didn't know what, but one of the things was like incredible investment in friendships that I don't know if I would have focused on in the same way. And so I was doing mission aviation at the time, so I just switched. I'm like, I'll just finish doing like theology and ministry. I don't know what I'll do with it. But so Julie and I met and we were best friends.
Yeah, for a long time.
Yeah.
That's a good way to start.
We were very good friends for a long time. And like I said, both of us actually were involved in short-term mission trips in college.
Yeah.
Back when we had youth in mission, we both did that one summer and different things. And then our junior year is when we started dating. But even that was still like, we both kind of had these plans for what was going to happen after graduation that didn't involve each other.
We had strong ideas of what God was going to do.
Yes, absolutely.
And it was not the same idea.
But God was definitely like bringing us together. And even as we were getting closer and coming together, we really didn't know what the future would look like. So it was kind of something we just didn't talk about a lot. But we kept growing in our relationship. So our senior year, we got engaged. And then after we graduated, we decided to just stay in Oklahoma City for a year to just work, and we were going to get married. And then we thought we would move somewhere and for Brian to go to seminary and I would go to graduate school maybe in social work. And that was kind of our loose plan.
Yeah. Before that, though, Julie tells a story of her mom because we were really not sure about, man, we're making this big commitment to one another. And I think anytime we're invited to make a deep or a big commitment, there's a lot of risk. And it is an act of faith. And so Julie was talking to her mom.
Because my parents had met Brian. He was one of my friends. They loved Brian. My mom was like, you guys are together all the time. Are you sure you're not dating? Like, what is this? And I said, no, Mom, why would we do that? After college, I'm going to go to Europe and volunteer with Nazarene missions. And Brian might do something with flying. And she said, Julie, those are great. Those are wonderful plans if that's where God is leading and what happens. But she said, you don't want to miss out on something God might have for you right now because of what you think might happen in the future. Mm-hmm. And I said, I never thought about it that way before. Like maybe this is something God has for me right now, this relationship, and maybe we don't really know what's going to happen in the future. So that was very instrumental in us just starting to date and then grow together as a couple. Yeah.
Well, I definitely think that's a great thought. I think we'll kind of leave it there for today. And tomorrow we're going to get more into kind of now that you guys decided to be together and you're kind of giving everything over to the Lord, where His plans actually led you instead of what your plans were. But I just think it is a wonderful thought and a wonderful sentiment that sometimes we're looking to the future so much of what we think God is going to do that there might be opportunities right in front of us that we need to take advantage of. We encourage you, as you're listening today, to check out everything that's going on at the church by going to shepnaz.org. Also, we encourage you to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Join back with us tomorrow as we continue this conversation. For Brian and Julie, I'm Joe. Have a great day. This podcast is a production of the Shepherd Church of the Nazarene, Gahanna, Ohio. Email to podcast@shepnaz.org and let us know what you think.